The dock creaked under my weight as I carefully navigated around the bow of my newly acquired 32-foot Sea Ray Sundancer. After years of hard work and saving, I'd finally purchased my dream boat, sleek, white with navy blue accents, and absolutely beautiful. Standing on the private dock extending from my waterfront property in Newport Beach, California, I felt a sense of accomplishment wash over me like the gentle waves lapping against the hull. I was inspecting some minor gelcoat damage when I heard the distinctive click-clack of heels on wood. Turning around, I saw a woman with an aggressively highlighted bob haircut marching down my dock like she owned it. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and she clutched a tablet to her chest like it contained state secrets. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone that immediately made my shoulders tense. "Are you Ryan Westfield?" "Yes, I am," I replied, straightening up. "And you're on my private property. Can I help you with something?" She looked at me as if I'd just told her the earth was flat. "I'm Patricia Daniels, president of the Bayview Shores Homeowners Association. We've received multiple complaints about your boat." She said the word like it was something distasteful. I blinked, genuinely confused. "My boat? I just bought it last week. What could possibly be the problem?" Patricia's nostrils flared slightly as she tapped aggressively on her tablet. "According to our HOA regulations, Section 12, Paragraph 3, watercraft exceeding 28 feet are not permitted to be docked at residential properties within our community." I couldn't help but laugh, which only made her expression harden. "Miss Daniels, I purchased this property specifically because it has no HOA restrictions on boat size. I did my due diligence before buying both the house and the boat." "Well, clearly you didn't," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "This entire area falls under Bayview Shores HOA jurisdiction. I've already contacted Harbor Patrol about your violation." I felt my blood pressure rising but tried to remain calm. "Look, there must be some misunderstanding. My property isn't part of Bayview Shores. I'm on the west side of the channel, which is Newport Cove. Different community entirely." Patricia's face reddened slightly. "I know exactly where your property is located, Mr. Westfield, and regardless, your boat exceeds our community standards and creates an eyesore for residents across the channel." "That's not how HOA jurisdiction works," I said, my patience beginning to wear thin. "You can't enforce your rules on properties that aren't part of your association." She huffed, glancing at her watch. "Harbor Patrol should be here shortly. They'll explain the regulations to you." With that, she turned and began typing something into her tablet. "Hold on," I said, pulling out my phone. "You can't just stand on my dock uninvited. This is private property." "I'm conducting official HOA business," she replied without looking up. "Not your HOA, not your business to conduct here," I countered, scrolling through my contacts for my lawyer's number. About 20 minutes of tense silence later, a Harbor Patrol boat approached my dock. Patricia smiled triumphantly, but her expression faltered when Officer James Rodriguez, whom I'd met when registering my boat the previous week, gave me a friendly wave. "Hey Ryan, got a call about some kind of violation," he said as he tied off his boat. "What's going on?" Before I could answer, Patricia stepped forward. "This vessel exceeds our community size limitations. It needs to be removed immediately." Officer Rodriguez looked confused. "Madam, are you the property owner?" "I'm Patricia Daniels, president of the Bayview Shores HOA." Officer Rodriguez nodded slowly, recognition dawning on his face. "Ah, Miss Daniels, we've spoken before." He turned to me. "Ryan, is your boat properly registered?" "Yes, all paperwork was completed last week. You helped me with it, remember?" He nodded. "And this is your private property, correct?" "Yes, Newport Cove, not part of Bayview Shores. Officer Rodriguez turned back to Patricia. Miss Daniels, Mr. Westfield's property isn't within your HOA's jurisdiction. His boat is properly registered and legally docked at his private residence. Patricia's face contorted in disbelief. That's impossible. Our HOA boundaries clearly extend to this side of the channel. No, they don't, Rodriguez replied firmly. And this is the third time this month you've called us about properties outside your jurisdiction. We've discussed this before. I crossed my arms, trying not to look too smug. Miss Daniels, I believe you're trespassing on my property. I'd appreciate it if you'd leave now. Her face flushed crimson. This isn't over, she hissed, clutching her tablet tighter. That boat violates community standards, and I'll be taking this to the city council. Officer Rodriguez sighed. Miss Daniels, I need to escort you off this property as requested by the owner. Please come with me. As they walked away, Patricia turned back one last time. You'll be hearing from us, Mr. Westfield. Little did I know. This was just the beginning of my war with Patricia and the Bayview Shores HOA. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on my nightstand. Groggily, I reached over and checked the screen. 5 missed calls from unknown numbers and a dozen text messages. Sitting up in bed, I scrolled through the texts, my confusion turning to anger with each one. Please move your eyesore of a boat. The channel isn't for showing off your midlife crisis. HOA violation notice, 24 hours to comply. What the hell was going on? I threw on some clothes and headed downstairs, coffee my immediate priority before dealing with whatever this was. Through my kitchen window, I could see my boat exactly where it should be, gently bobbing in the morning light. Nothing seemed amiss. As I was pouring my coffee, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my next-door neighbor, Thomas Grant, standing there with a concerned expression. Morning, Ryan. Have you checked your mailbox yet? He asked. No, why? Thomas handed me a glossy flyer. These were in everyone's mailboxes this morning. Thought you should see it. The flyer featured a poorly photoshopped image of my boat with flames and oil spills added around it. The headline read, Environmental hazard and eyesore in our beautiful channel, act now. Below was a call to action for residents to contact Harbor Patrol, the City Council, and me directly, complete with my phone number, email, and home address. What the? I stopped myself from cursing. Who distributed these? Thomas shrugged. Didn't see who delivered them, but it has Bayview Shores HOA letterhead at the bottom. I flipped the flyer over, and sure enough, there was the Bayview Shores logo with Patricia Daniels listed as the contact person. This was unbelievable. This is straight-up harassment, I said, my coffee forgotten. And they've published my personal information without consent. The Bayview Shores HOA has always been aggressive, but this seems extreme even for them, Thomas remarked. Patricia's been president for about a year, and since then it's gotten worse. Several homeowners on our side have had run-ins with her. I grabbed my phone. I'm calling my lawyer. After a brief conversation with my attorney, Michael Chen, I had a game plan. First, document everything. Second, file a police report for harassment. Third, prepare a cease and desist letter. By afternoon, I had filed the police report, though the officer seemed less than enthusiastic about what he viewed as a neighborhood squabble. Michael was drafting the cease and desist letter, but in the meantime, the calls and texts continued. I ended up having to silence my phone. As I was taking photos of the flyer for documentation, I noticed Patricia herself walking along the public pathway on the other side of the channel, pointing at my house and talking animatedly with 2 other women. Even from this distance, I could recognize that distinctive bob haircut. My doorbell rang again. This time it was a young couple I didn't recognize. "Are you Ryan Westfield?" the man asked. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "We're from the Orange County Environmental Protection Coalition," the woman said, holding up some kind of ID badge that I couldn't really make out. "We've received reports about a potentially hazardous vessel docked at this address." I sighed deeply. "Let me guess, Patricia Daniels contacted you." They exchanged glances. "We're not at liberty to disclose who filed the complaint," the man said. "There is no environmental hazard," I explained. "My boat is brand new, properly maintained, and legally docked at my private residence. This is harassment from the HOA across the channel." They seemed uncertain, but insisted on seeing the boat anyway. I led them to my dock, where they spent about 15 minutes inspecting the vessel before conceding there was no issue. "Sorry for the inconvenience," the woman said as they prepared to leave. "We have to investigate all complaints." "I understand," I replied. "But you might want to be aware that the Bayview Shores HOA seems to be filing false reports." As they were leaving, I noticed a harbor patrol boat approaching again. Officer Rodriguez was back, this time with a colleague. "Twice in 2 days," he said with an apologetic smile as he tied off his boat. "Sorry about this, Ryan. Let me guess, more complaints." "Several, actually. Claims of leaking fuel, excessive noise, and improper lighting." I gestured to my perfectly maintained silent boat. "Does that look like it's leaking fuel or making noise? It's not even running, and it's daytime, so lighting is irrelevant." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "I know, but we have to respond to all complaints. Mind if we take a quick look to make it official?" After another inspection confirmed what was already obvious, my boat was in perfect compliance. Officer Rodriguez looked genuinely apologetic. "Between you and me," he said quietly, "Patricia Daniels has been causing problems for Harbor Patrol for months. She calls about everything: kayakers too close to her view, paddleboarders making excessive splashing, you name it." "Can't you do something about false reports?" I asked. "We've warned her about misusing emergency services," he replied. "But she's gotten smarter, organizing other people to make the calls instead. Hard to prove it's coordinated." After they left, I sat on my deck, looking across the channel at the Bayview Shores community. It was a collection of upscale homes, not unlike mine, but with a more uniform appearance, the clear mark of strict HOA control. In the distance, I could see people gathered on Patricia's deck, occasionally looking in my direction with binoculars. This was getting ridiculous. I pulled out my phone and called Michael. "How's that cease and desist letter coming?" I asked when he answered. "Just finished it," Michael replied. "But Ryan, I think we might need to go further. Distributing your personal information like this could constitute doxing, depending on the circumstances. And the false reports to Harbor Patrol and environmental agencies could be seen as filing false official statements. What do you suggest? I'll send the cease and desist today. If the harassment continues, we look at a restraining order and possibly a civil suit for defamation and harassment." That evening, as I was grilling some steaks on my deck, I noticed increased activity across the channel. Through my own set of binoculars, two could play that game. I could see Patricia hosting what appeared to be an impromptu HOA meeting on her deck. Occasionally, someone would point in my direction, and the group would shake their heads in apparent disapproval. The next morning, Michael delivered the cease and desist letter to Patricia personally. He called me afterward. "She didn't take it well," he said. "Claimed you were the one harassing her by flaunting your oversized boat in view of Bayview Shores residents. Said it was diminishing their property values." "That's absurd," I replied. "There are dozens of boats in this channel, many larger than mine." I pointed that out. She said the others were grandfathered in, but yours was new and particularly offensive. How can a standard white boat be offensive? According to her, the gleaming white finish creates a blinding glare that's causing visual pollution for residents. I couldn't help but laugh despite my frustration. So now sunlight reflecting off a boat is pollution. What's next? I soon found out what was next. That afternoon, 3 official-looking individuals in suits approached my door. They introduced themselves as code enforcement officers from the city of Newport Beach. Mr. Westfield, we've received complaints about unpermitted modifications to your dock and potential zoning violations, the lead officer explained. I showed them my property documents, dock permits, and all relevant paperwork. After an hour of inspection and verification, they found nothing amiss. Everything appears to be in order, the officer concluded. Sorry for the inconvenience. As they were leaving, I couldn't help but ask, was Patricia Daniels involved in this complaint? The officers exchanged glances. We can't comment on who files complaints, one said diplomatically, but his expression told me everything I needed to know. That night, I received an email from the Newport Beach City Council informing me that an emergency agenda item had been added to the next meeting. Discussion of watercraft size limitations in residential channels. The email explained that several concerned citizens had requested the review, citing quality of life concerns. This was escalating beyond a simple neighborhood dispute. Patricia was trying to change city regulations just to force me to remove my boat. I forwarded the email to Michael, who called me immediately. This is actually good news, he said, surprising me. How is this good? She's trying to change the law to target me specifically. Because now it's moved into the public record. If she's behind this, and I'm sure she is, we can establish a pattern of targeted harassment. Plus, city council meetings are public. You'll have the opportunity to present your side. The city council meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. In the meantime, the harassment continued. More calls, more texts, and now emails from concerned citizens who all seemed to use suspiciously similar language about my monstrous vessel and its detrimental impact on the character of our waterways. Sunday morning, I was enjoying coffee on my deck when I noticed unusual activity on the water. A small flotilla of kayaks and paddleboards was gathering in the channel, directly in front of my property. Each person held a sign with slogans like "Size Matters," "Respect Our Waterways," and "No Mega Boats." In the lead kayak was none other than Patricia Daniels, megaphone in hand. "Residents of Newport Beach," she called out, her voice amplified across the water. "We are here to protest the increasing presence of oversized vessels in our residential channels." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. An actual protest over my completely normal, regulation-compliant boat. Several of my neighbors came out onto their decks, watching the spectacle with expressions ranging from amusement to annoyance. Thomas walked over from next door, coffee cup in hand. "This is something, isn't it?" he said, shaking his head. "Patricia's really outdone herself this time." "Is this even legal?" I asked. "Protesting in the channel like this? Technically, the water is public, but they can't block navigation," Thomas replied. "Though I doubt any of them know the first thing about maritime law." As if on cue, a harbor patrol boat appeared, Officer Rodriguez once again at the helm. He addressed the protesters via his own loudspeaker, instructing them to disperse, as they were creating a navigation hazard. Most complied immediately, but Patricia remained, arguing with the officers until they threatened to issue citations. As the protest broke up, Patricia pointed directly at my house and shouted through her megaphone, "This isn't over, Westfield. The city council will hear our concerns. By Tuesday evening, I was prepared for the city council meeting. Michael had helped me gather documentation showing that my boat complied with all existing regulations, statements from neighbors supporting my right to dock my vessel at my property, and even a petition signed by several waterfront homeowners in my area who opposed any new restrictions. The Newport Beach City Hall was more crowded than usual, with many Bayview Shores residents in attendance, identifiable by their matching Preserve Our Waterways buttons. Patricia sat in the front row, surrounded by her supporters, occasionally turning to give me icy glares. When the agenda item came up, Patricia was the first to speak during public comment. She approached the podium with the confidence of someone who believed victory was assured. "Honorable council members," she began, "I represent the Bayview Shores Homeowners Association and over 200 concerned citizens who believe our beautiful waterways are being threatened by oversized vessels that destroy the character of our residential channels." She went on to present what she called evidence of the harm caused by boats like mine, doctored photos showing my boat taking up an unrealistic amount of space, charts claiming property value decreases with no supporting data, and anecdotes about children being traumatized by the looming presence of large boats. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my presentation factual and calm, in stark contrast to Patricia's emotional appeal. "Council members, my name is Ryan Westfield. I'm a homeowner in Newport Cove who has been targeted by a coordinated harassment campaign led by the Bayview Shores HOA president, Patricia Daniels. My boat is fully compliant with all current regulations, properly registered, and docked legally at my private property. I presented my documentation, including the harassment timeline, the false flyers, and the statements from Harbor Patrol confirming the multiple unfounded complaints. The issue before you tonight isn't about boat size," I concluded. "It's about whether one HOA president can use city resources and regulatory processes to wage a personal vendetta against a property owner who isn't even part of her association." The council members asked questions of both Patricia and me, clearly trying to understand the actual scope of the issue. When one council member asked Patricia to clarify exactly how many complaints they had received about oversized boats in the last year, she fumbled. "Well, there have been numerous concerns expressed," she said vaguely. "Can you provide an actual number?" the councilwoman pressed. "I don't have the exact figures with me," the city manager spoke up then. "Actually, we do track complaints related to watercraft. In the past 12 months, we've received 27 complaints about boats in residential channels. 23 of those complaints were about a single boat, Mr. Westfield's, and all were filed within the past week." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Patricia's face reddened. After deliberation, the council declined to add any new restrictions on boat size for residential docks, citing lack of evidence of any actual problem. They did, however, direct the city attorney to review the harassment claims I'd presented and determine if any action should be taken. As the meeting adjourned, Patricia approached me, her expression tight with anger. "You may think you've won, Westfield, but this isn't over," she hissed quietly. "The Bayview Shores HOA has resources you can't imagine. We protect our community by any means necessary." "Miss Daniels," I replied calmly, "I'd strongly suggest you stop targeting me and my property. The cease and desist was just a first step. Continue this behavior and I'll be forced to pursue legal remedies." She laughed dismissively. "Good luck proving anything." As she walked away, Michael leaned toward me. "Actually, I think we already have quite a lot to prove." The following morning, I woke up to a disturbing sight. someone had spray-painted "Move your boat" across my mailbox and driveway. Security cameras caught the vandal, a young man in a hoodie, but his face wasn't visible. What was visible, however, was the Bayview Shores parking permit sticker on his car's windshield. I called the police, who took a report and collected the security footage. Officer Melissa Torres seemed more interested than the previous officers had been. "Mr. Westfield, this crosses the line from a nuisance complaint into criminal vandalism," she explained. "And given the ongoing situation you've described, we'll be taking this seriously." Later that day, I received a call from Thomas, who seemed agitated. "Ryan, you need to see this. Patricia's just sent out an email to all Bayview Shores residents. One of my friends over there forwarded it to me. He sent me the email, and as I read it, my blood boiled. Patricia had essentially placed a bounty on information about me, offering HOA fee discounts to anyone who could provide documentation of violations or inappropriate behavior by me, or associated with my boat. The email specifically encouraged residents to be creative in documenting disturbances and suggested that sometimes violations only become apparent when properly framed. I forwarded the email to Michael and the police, adding it to the growing file of evidence. That evening, as I was working in my home office, I heard a splashing sound near my dock. Looking out the window, I saw a small inflatable boat with two men I didn't recognize examining my boat. I rushed outside. "Hey, what are you doing?" I called out. The men looked up, startled. "Just passing by," one of them said unconvincingly. "You're trespassing," I replied firmly. "Leave now or I'm calling the police." They quickly paddled away, but not before I noticed one of them had what looked like a drill or screwdriver in his hand. Had they been attempting to damage my boat? I immediately called Harbor Patrol, who sent Officer Rodriguez once again. After examining my boat, he found fresh scratches near the waterline that hadn't been there before. "Someone was definitely trying to damage your property," he confirmed. "This is escalating in a dangerous way. I'm going to increase patrols in this area, but you might want to consider additional security measures." The next day, I installed underwater lights and additional security cameras covering the dock and boat from multiple angles. I also hired a private security company to patrol my property during the night for the next week. It was expensive, but the thought of someone damaging my $300,000 boat made it worth every penny. 2 days later, the security investment paid off. At around 2 a.m., the cameras captured two individuals approaching my dock in a small inflatable boat, the same two men from before. This time, they were carrying what looked like containers of liquid. The security guard confronted them and they fled, dropping one of the containers in their haste. It contained used motor oil. The police were able to identify one of the men from the security footage, Martin Evans, the son of one of Patricia's close friends and a resident of Bayview Shores. When questioned, he eventually admitted that Patricia had offered to waive his mother's late HOA fees if he would create documentation that my boat was leaking pollutants into the channel. This confession was the turning point. The police now had evidence of conspiracy to commit vandalism and filing false reports. They obtained a warrant to search Patricia's home and electronic devices, where they found detailed plans for the harassment campaign against me, including a spreadsheet tracking the assigned tasks for different Bayview Shores residents. Patricia Daniels was arrested on charges of conspiracy, solicitation of criminal mischief, harassment, and filing false police reports. The news spread quickly through Newport Beach, with many Bayview Shores residents expressing shock and embarrassment at their HOA president's behavior. In the aftermath, The Bayview Shores HOA board issued a formal apology to me and immediately removed Patricia from her position. An emergency election was held, and a more reasonable resident, Elaine Foster, was elected as the new president. The legal consequences for Patricia were significant. She ultimately pleaded guilty to reduced charges, receiving 2 years of probation, a substantial fine, and community service. The court also issued a permanent restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of me, my property, or my boat. More importantly, the city of Newport Beach used the incident as an opportunity to review HOA regulations and oversight. New guidelines were established limiting HOA jurisdiction and powers, with specific prohibitions against harassment and targeting of non-member properties. The city also implemented a review process for HOA complaints to prevent abuse of city resources. As for my boat, it remained proudly docked at my property, where it belonged. In a gesture of community healing, I offered to host a channel day where residents from both sides of the water could come together for food, drinks, and boat rides. The event was a huge success, with many Bayview Shores residents expressing their embarrassment over Patricia's behavior and their desire to move forward as good neighbors. 6 months after Patricia's arrest, I was enjoying a peaceful evening on my boat when Elaine Foster, the new Bayview Shores HOA president, approached in a small electric boat. "Mr. Westfield," she called out, "do you have a moment?" I invited her aboard, curious about this unexpected visit. "I wanted to personally apologize again for what happened," she said as we sat in the cockpit. "Our community has done a lot of soul-searching since Patricia's actions." "I appreciate that," I replied. "It's good to put it behind us." She nodded, looking out at the channel. "That's actually why I'm here. Bayview Shores is hosting a channel cleanup day next weekend, and we'd be honored if you'd join us. Maybe bring your boat. It would be a powerful symbol of moving forward together." I smiled, appreciating the olive branch. "I'd be happy to." The cleanup day was a success, with residents from both communities working together to remove debris from the water and shorelines. My boat, once the subject of so much controversy, served as the command center for the operation, with volunteers loading collected trash onto it for proper disposal. As I watched people from both sides of the channel laughing and working together, I reflected on how one person's obsession with control and rules had nearly torn apart a community. Patricia had used her HOA position not to improve her neighborhood, but as a weapon against someone she simply didn't like. Thomas joined me on the boat, handing me a cold beer. "Quite a change from a few months ago, huh?" "Night and day," I agreed. "Never thought I'd have Bayview Shores residents volunteering to clean my boat," he laughed. "HOAs can be great when they focus on building community instead of policing it. Too bad it took all this drama to figure that out." Later that evening, as the volunteers gathered for a barbecue on the public dock, Elaine presented me with a framed certificate naming me an honorary friend of Bayview Shores, a symbolic gesture acknowledging that being good neighbors transcended HOA boundaries. In the year that followed, both communities thrived, with a new spirit of cooperation replacing the previous hostility. Patricia, I heard, had moved to Arizona after completing her community service, presumably to a neighborhood without waterfront views or boats to obsess over. As for me and my oversized boat, we continued to enjoy the peaceful waters of Newport Beach, a daily reminder that standing up to bullies, even those armed with HOA bylaws, and a misplaced sense of authority, was always worth the fight. On the anniversary of what locals now jokingly called the Great Boat War, I hosted a celebration on my dock and boat for neighbors from both sides of the channel. Looking around at the smiling faces, I couldn't help but reflect on how something as simple as a boat had exposed the worst and eventually brought out the best in our waterfront community. To good neighbors, I toasted, raising my glass as the sun set over the channel. And to remembering that rules should bring us together, not drive us apart. The gathered crowd cheered, the sound echoing across the water that no longer divided us but instead connected us as a community. 2 years after the incident, my boat remained a proud fixture at my dock. I'd added some upgrades, a new stereo system, updated navigation equipment, and custom upholstery, making it even more of a showpiece than before. But now, instead of resentment, it often drew compliments from Bayview Shores residents who had come to see it as part of the channel's charm. One sunny Saturday morning, as I was washing the deck, I noticed a familiar face approaching along the public walkway on the opposite shore. It took me a moment to recognize her with the new haircut and more subdued clothing, but it was unmistakably Patricia Daniels. My first instinct was concern she was violating the restraining order by being within 500 feet of my property. But as I watched, she stopped well short of that distance, staring across the water at my boat for several long moments before turning and walking away. Later that day, I received a letter in the mail with an Arizona return address but no name. Inside was a simple note. "I was wrong. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused you. Enjoy your boat." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I never saw Patricia again after that day, but her brief appearance and unexpected apology provided a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The boat war, as dramatic and stressful as it had been, had ultimately led to positive changes not just for me, but for the entire community. The Newport Beach City Council had implemented new regulations on HOA oversight, requiring annual reviews and clear documentation of jurisdiction boundaries. Bayview Shores had transformed under Elaine's leadership, focusing more on community events and less on punitive enforcement. And I had gained something unexpected, a deeper connection to my neighborhood, and a renewed appreciation for standing up for what's right. As I sat on my boat that evening, watching the sunset paint the channel in shades of orange and gold, I realized that the experience had taught me something valuable about home, community, and the importance of boundaries, both physical and social. Patricia had crossed those boundaries, using an institution meant to protect community standards as a weapon for personal vendettas. In doing so, she'd ultimately lost everything: her position, her reputation, and eventually her home. The irony wasn't lost on me. In her obsessive quest to control how others used their property, she'd ended up losing control of her own life. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority and the importance of perspective. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Annual channel party planning meeting tomorrow. You bringing the boat?" I smiled and replied, "Wouldn't miss it. The Sundancer is ready for duty." 3 years after Patricia's crusade against my boat, Newport Beach had implemented a new community mediation program, specifically designed to address disputes between HOAs and property owners. I'd been asked to share my experience as part of the training for the volunteer mediators, using the boat war as a case study in how not to handle disagreements. The fundamental problem wasn't really about the size of my boat, I explained to the group of mediators in training. It was about power and control. Patricia saw something she couldn't control from her side of the channel, and it bothered her enough that she was willing to break laws to get her way. "How would you have preferred the situation to be handled?" one of the trainees asked. I thought for a moment. If she had genuine concerns, a simple conversation would have been the place to start. Not false reports, not harassment, not orchestrating vandalism, just a neighbor-to-neighbor talk. After the training session, a woman approached me. She introduced herself as Tamara Thompson, a resident of another Newport Beach HOA. "Your story really resonated with me," she said. "I'm on my HOA board, and I sometimes see that same controlling behavior starting to emerge. It's a reminder of how easy it is for these organizations to lose sight of their purpose, which is to bring people together, not drive them apart," she replied. "At least, that's what I believe." We ended up having coffee and a lengthy discussion about the proper role of HOAs in building community. Tamara mentioned that her association was working on revising their bylaws, and she invited me to share my perspective at their next meeting. That conversation led to an unexpected second career for me. While I maintained my primary job in software development, I began consulting with HOAs throughout Orange County on governance best practices and conflict resolution. The boat war had given me a unique perspective that many associations found valuable. 4 years after Patricia's arrest, I was invited to speak at a statewide conference on HOA management. My presentation, titled "From Control to Community: Rethinking HOA Governance," drew on my experience but also on the positive changes I'd witnessed in Bayview Shores under Elaine's leadership. "The most successful HOAs," I told the audience, "understand that their primary purpose isn't enforcement but enhancement, not just of property values, but of quality of life for all residents." After the presentation, an older gentleman approached me. "Mr. Westfield, that was fascinating. I've been managing HOAs for 30 years, and I've seen exactly the type of power-hungry behavior you described. It's refreshing to hear someone advocate for a more balanced approach." "Thank you," I replied. "It's all based on real experience." "I gathered that," he said with a knowing smile. "By the way, how's the boat?" I laughed. "Still there, still the same size, still making me happy every time I look at it." As years passed, the boat war became something of a local legend in Newport Beach, often cited whenever HOA overreach made the news. I occasionally gave interviews about the experience, always emphasizing the same message. HOAs serve an important purpose when they focus on community building rather than rigid enforcement. 5 years after the incident, I was preparing to sell my house. A job opportunity in San Diego meant relocating, and while I loved my Newport Beach home, it was time for a change. The real estate agent suggested highlighting the boat dock in the listing. "Waterfront property with private dock suitable for vessels up to 40 feet, she wrote. "HOA-free living with all the benefits of Newport Beach." The house sold quickly to a couple who, ironically, were moving from Bayview Shores. "We've been watching your house for years," the husband confessed during the closing, "ever since the incident. We always admired how you stood your ground." As I prepared to move, I hosted one final gathering on my beloved boat. Friends, neighbors, even Elaine and several Bayview Shores residents came to say goodbye. Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To Ryan," he said, "who taught us all that sometimes. Fighting for what's yours isn't just about property, it's about principle." I looked around at the gathered faces, at the channel that had been both the setting for conflict and the backdrop for reconciliation, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had started as a simple desire to dock my dream boat at my dream house had evolved into something much more meaningful, a lesson about community, about standing up to bullies, and about the importance of keeping power in check. As the sun set on my last evening as a Newport Beach resident, I took the Sundancer out for a final cruise through the channel. As I passed the Bayview Shores docks, several residents waved. I waved back, reflecting on how differently things had turned out than Patricia had intended. She had wanted my boat gone, but instead, she was the one who had left. She had tried to use the HOA as a weapon, but it had backfired, leading to reforms that strengthened the community. She had attempted to divide neighbors, but ultimately brought them closer together. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for San Diego, I took one last look at my empty house, the dock, and the channel. The boat war had been stressful, frustrating, and at times frightening, but it had also been important. It had revealed the dangers of unchecked authority and the value of standing firm against it. I climbed into my car, the Sundancer already on its trailer, and headed for its new home in San Diego. As I drove away, I couldn't help but smile at the thought that somewhere, perhaps, Patricia Daniels was still seething about that oversized boat, never realizing that her obsession with it had changed not just my life, but an entire community for the better. 6 years after moving to San Diego, I received a surprising email from Elaine Foster. The Bayview Shores HOA was celebrating its 50th anniversary, and they were creating a commemorative book about the community's history. They wanted to include a chapter about the boat incident, as they now diplomatically called it, and were requesting my perspective. "We believe it was a pivotal moment in our community's evolution," Elaine wrote. "The changes that came afterward made Bayview Shores a better place to live." I agreed to contribute, writing a thoughtful reflection on the experience and its aftermath. I emphasized how what had started as a conflict had ultimately led to growth and positive change for everyone involved, except perhaps Patricia. A few months later, Elaine sent me a copy of the finished book. The chapter about the incident was balanced and fair, acknowledging the HOA's mistakes while celebrating the reforms that followed. There was even a recent photo of my old house, with the new owner's boat even larger than mine had been proudly docked outside. "Some lessons," the caption read, "are worth learning." I smiled as I closed the book, thinking about how a simple dispute over a boat had rippled outward, touching so many lives and ultimately bringing positive change to a community I no longer lived in but would always remember. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about protecting what's yours, it's about establishing boundaries that ultimately benefit everyone. Patricia had never understood that. In her mind, boundaries were things to be imposed on others, not respected in others. Her failure to recognize that basic principle had cost her dearly, while teaching everyone else a valuable lesson about the proper limits of communal authority. As I looked out at my boat, now docked at my San Diego home, I felt grateful for the experience, as difficult as it had been, and for the unexpected ways it had enriched my life. The boat war had been about much more than just a 32-foot Sea Ray Sundancer. It had been about principle, about community, and about the courage to stand firm when faced with unreasonable demands. And in that sense, it had been worth every moment of the fight.